Okay, everybody, welcome back. Again, maybe there's 10 of you now. There were 5 before. Who knows? So I decided to kind of go a little deeper on these videos. There's a lot going on in the world. People are nervous. People are worried. There's a lot of fear. And fear is one of those things that will always drive you to jump to a conclusion or it'll move you to a path that is rarely ever the correct path. It's a instinctual reaction, and oftentimes it leads mankind to ruin, is to operate and act upon fear. So I thought to myself, why not introduce to this channel something that helped me deal with controlling my fear, controlling my anger, controlling my emotions when they would often get the better of me and lead me down the wrong path. And embrace logic and rationality, which will often lead you down the right path if you know how to use it. So, the video is entitled Stoicism, a Primer Part 1, and I'm going to walk everyone through my understanding of Stoicism, where it came from, how it became such a significant force in the ancient world, and how it dictated a lot of Western thought from its origin in Greek history up until the modern age. And I think if people were to embrace Stoicism in these times, they would find that fear does not have to dictate how we behave, how we react. Fear is something that is real in some respects, but regardless of whether or not it's real, you cannot let it cloud your judgment. You cannot let it dictate how you will react and when you will react. So without further ado, let's talk about Stoicism. Where did it come from? Where did it get its start? So the founder of Stoicism is a gentleman by the name of Zeno of Citium. Citium is in modern-day Cyprus. In Zeno's day and age, which was around 301 BC, Citium was a city in Cyprus which was controlled by Greece. So around 301 BC is when Zeno kind of hit the scene, so to speak, in the philosophical world. But where did he come from? I mean, how did he get his start? Or did he just come out of nowhere and he was just this brilliant philosopher? No. Most great minds had to stand on the shoulder of other great minds, who those great minds had to stand on even bigger shoulders. So Zeno got his inspiration from several sources. But like all great Greek philosophers and Greek philosophic thought, we have to go back to the beginning, which is the main man, Socrates. You can't talk about Western thought or modern philosophy without everything leading back to Socrates. Like all roads lead to Rome, okay, all philosophic roads lead back to Socrates. Socrates had a student when he was teaching his Socratic philosophy in Athens as well. His student was a man by the name of Antisthenes. Antisthenes was a student of Socrates, and he developed his own philosophic school after Socrates passed away, called Cynicism. Antisthenes was a cynic. Now we think of the modern day definition of cynicism, that person's cynical. They're a cynic. All they do is complain and look for fault in things. And that's the origin of those words, and the school of cynicism is responsible for that, but that's not the full story. Regardless, this video is about Stoicism, so we'll leave cynicism, for a different time if we revisit it. But Zeno was a fan of Antisthenes. He wasn't a student, but he was a fan. And he followed Antisthenes and appreciated his school of thought with cynicism. So he took a lot of inspiration from Antisthenes, and Antisthenes, as I said earlier, was a student of Socrates. So indirectly, you could say Zeno had direct inspiration from Socrates. Okay, so Zeno taught his philosophy at the Stoa Poikile. I think that's how that's pronounced. Stoa poi kyle. Sounds Hawaiian almost. Stoa poikile. I don't speak ancient Greek. It translates to painted porch. So Zeno was teaching this philosophy at the Stoa poikile, the painted porch, near the Athenian Agora in 301 BC. The Athenian Agora, that's also one of the words in English that we derive, this lineage from. Agora means just open public place. It's an open space. Someone has agoraphobia. That means they're afraid of being out in wide open public places. Sounds strange to have that fear, but it exists. Like claustrophobia, fear of closed spaces. Agoraphobia, fear of big spaces. So the Athenian Agora was a public meeting area where Athenians could all meet up like a park. They could play games. They could chat. They could exchange business. Merchants would show up, and philosophers would show up because it was free. You didn't have to have a school. You didn't have to rent space in some building. You could just show up at the Agora, and if you sounded smart and enough people thought you knew what you were talking about, they'd gather around at the Agora and hear what you had to say. And if you were really good, you would develop followers, disciples, so to speak. So every day you'd come and you'd speak and you'd profess your philosophy. People would show up on a regular basis. They'd kind of become your students. Just the way that Antisthenes and this guy, Plato, did with Socrates. We'll get to Plato in a minute. So when you would go to the Agora and you would walk into the Agora seeing everyone gathered around, and someone said, hey, who are those guys over by the painted porch? Well, that's Zeno and his Stoics. So the Stoa, the porch, became synonymous with the philosophy. It's literally where the term comes from. Stoicism, Stoa, the porch. It's named after the place that Zeno would hold court in the Agora. That's it. Nothing fancy about that. Okay, so what are the 4 cardinal virtues of Stoicism? Like if you get Stoicism down to a 4-legged chair, so to speak, what are the 4 legs? Well, the first is wisdom, and that is the ability to extend human experience into deep human understanding. Okay, so what is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability of a human being to experience life over a long enough timeline or under certain circumstances that you could say they have a wealth of knowledge based upon their experience, and they have the ability to condense that knowledge into understanding. For example, if I'm a fisherman and I fish every day for 20 years of my life, you could say I have a lot of wisdom as it comes to being a fisherman, assuming that I know how to catch fish and I catch them. If you wanted to gain wisdom on how to fish, you would go see the successful fisherman who's been doing it for 20 years. Would you go see a fisherman who fishes once a year for 100 years? Maybe he has the same experience, but not that 20 years of straight human experience condensed every day, living that lifestyle, and that's wisdom. Now, we don't say children have wisdom because they just haven't been around long enough. They haven't experienced enough. They haven't gone through enough of the phases of life to really know what a deep human understanding of life is. No fault of their own. There are plenty of smart kids or clever kids, but children cannot be wise simply because they just haven't lived enough. So wisdom is a fundamental cardinal virtue of Stoicism, to take the essence of human experience and condense it into deep human understanding. Why are we here? Why do we do the things we do? Is this correct? Etc. Okay, number 2, courage. The courage to face all challenges with calm and calculation. That's an ability you need to have if you're going to embrace Stoicism. Courage is one of those things that some people are born with it and some people aren't. For the people who aren't born with it, they can learn it. They just have to reason with themselves to overcome things that hold them back internally. And it goes back to fear. Fear is something that if you do not master it, you will never find courage. Courage is something that if you don't have it naturally, which is rare, but it exists, You have to cultivate it. So to face challenges with calm and calculation. And if you think about Stoicism, or the word Stoic in modern usage, that's kind of how people view someone who is quote unquote Stoic. They have this calm reserve. They're like chiseled rock. They don't get happy, they don't get sad, they don't get angry, and they don't get jealous. They're just even keeled down the middle, Stoic. The ancient Stoics would tell you that's not accurate. They understood that people are going to feel emotions. That's natural. But letting your emotions overcome you and becoming a slave to those emotions is what you have to embrace Stoicism to overcome. When you embrace this philosophy, you are now teaching yourself to no longer let your emotions be your master. Okay, justice. The ability to seek truth and declare right from wrong. Number 3. So this is fundamental to any philosophy that's worth its salt. Right? If you take any philosophy and it doesn't have justice as one of its core principles, being the ability to seek truth and to declare right from wrong, that philosophy is not worth considering. Philosophy, okay, comes from the Greek philosophia, which means love of wisdom. Okay, how do we gain wisdom? We gather enough human experience, and then we formulate that experience into human understanding. Philosophy is the love of this becoming this. How can you possibly gain this accurately if you do not embrace justice? To seek truth and to declare right from wrong, you need to embrace this as you gain human experience so that you can later create human understanding with this frame of reference. What is true, what is false, what is right, what is wrong. That is the object of justice. Stoicism, absolutely. Without truth, without knowing right from wrong, without knowing how to act correctly and how to act incorrectly, without that distinction, there is no truth, there is no justice, you gain no wisdom. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. Without justice, that leg, that third leg of the chair, it falls over. Temperance. That's the last one. To control one's appetites and to moderate the senses. Okay, as I was saying before, Stoicism is a philosophy used to teach people that there are things outside of your control and then things within your control. Your emotions are within your control. If you don't know temperance, you cannot know how to possibly control those emotions. And by temperance, that means things that come to you via your senses. Temperance is being able to smell something without having to taste it. Being able to see something without having to touch it. Being able to hear something without having to believe it. That's temperance, okay? Being able to take certain things via the senses and to filter out that which is not just and that which does not gain you wisdom. Moderate your senses. Control your appetites. If you do these things, you will learn to control your emotions, control your reaction to the world, and separate that which is outside your control, which is most of human existence, and that which is within your realm of control, which is mostly up here. So these 4 cardinal virtues can be found in Plato's Republic. I mentioned, obviously Socrates was tutor of Plato's, and Plato to Aristotle. It's in his Republic, which is another great book. Book 4, page 423 to 435. It may be on a different page depending on what translation you have, but it's in book 4. And those are pretty accurate. So, Zeno of Citium gave us the Stoic philosophic thought. The school of Stoicism came from Zeno. This is just a primer. This is pretty basic. I'll probably do parts 2 and 3 in the future. It's going to need at least 3 parts just to get us started. I'll talk more about how I came to embrace Stoicism as a way of dealing with life, and I'll give you some of my favorites as far as Stoic sources go. We'll talk about the 3 titans of Stoicism. That's actually going to be pretty cool. I'll recommend some reading if you want to dive deeper. But this is the basis. We went from Socrates, Antisthenes, to Zeno, 301 BC. these are the 4 basic tenets, but it gets a lot more involved. But anyway, this is part 1, Stoicism Primer. Thanks, and take it easy.